hope I'm on the right page. So my name's Curtis, and I was asked by one of my good friends, my good brothers, a man that I've known for a little while, for quite some while, I guess, to if I'd speak live on the Red Road Warriors page, and I accepted, but I'm gonna give people a chance to get on here. I don't know if they get exactly started at 7 o'clock. Can you guys all hear me? Can you hear me? So my name, like I said, my name's Curtis Jackson. I'm a grateful recovering addict, and I was asked by a good friend of mine, a good brother, if I'd speak live on the Red Road Warriors page, and I humbly accepted. And I'm gonna give it a few minutes to see if anybody's gonna jump on. I do appreciate the ones that are watching. I hope I'm on the right page. So, I'm just gonna get started because I think they do record it. So, so my name's Curtis, and I'm a grateful recovering addict. I reside in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, but I was born and raised in Balko, Minnesota, the Leech Lake Reservation. I was born November 17th, 1979, to Lisa and Simon Jackson, and along with me came a twin brother. His name is Justin. Funny story before we get started is my mom was told she was only going to be having one kid. So they were going to name the boy Curtis Justin Jackson. When she was delivering, I got stuck in the birth canal, and so they had to do emergency C-section, and they found my twin brother, Justin. And then upon making sure everything was in place, they're getting ready to sew my mom back up, and they found my foot. So, I'm often referred to as a foot baby. So that's just a little story to get started. So break the ice a little bit. Kind of nervous tonight. I don't know why. I've done this plenty of times, but I'm gonna get started. Like I said, I was born in November 17th, 1979, and growing up in Balko, Minnesota, I witnessed a lot of drug abuse, alcoholism, poverty, domestic abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, just a lot of families fighting families. And but one thing about that was, when it really came down to families protecting families, that's one thing we could always count on. And they say it takes a village to raise a child, but today we need that same village, to step up and help us fight this drug epidemic. And that means everybody getting involved. I think it's been done time and time again where people just turn their back on the whole situation of drug abuse, criminal activities, because it doesn't directly affect them. So they just feel like, it's not affecting me, so why should I say anything? Why should I do anything? But, as Native American people, we know better, and we were raised different. And we were raised to live that Minobumanazi win, the good life. And for the longest time, I wasn't living that good life. And it took me a lot for me to be able to have the life that I do today. I'm very grateful and I'm very blessed with the life that I have today, but it also came with a lot of hardship and a lot of hard work, a lot of changes, a lot of healthy boundaries. So, the earliest memory that I have growing up is one that were our next door neighbors who were, they are our godmother and our godfather, Bob and Sandra Fairbanks. And I remember their daughters, Jen and Shannon, pulling us in a sled. It was wintertime, and I remember we had these ugly maroon snowsuits, jacket and pants, and I don't know why I remember that, but that's one of the only memories that I have, growing up, other than like when I got older, like from the age of like 3 to the age of like 9. It's kind of a blur. And then, the stuff that I do remember is being subjected to some physical abuse, some emotional abuse, and some mental abuse. Living in Ball Club and growing up in Ball Club, it was far from ideal, and that's what I like to say, because it was, my parents, they did their best with what they had, and them suffering from their own trauma, suffering from their own disease of addiction. It wasn't easy for either one of them to live a normal life, what they like to say. Like I said, they did the best they could. They always made sure that we had some kind of food on the table, whether it was commodities or whatever. They also made sure that we had clothes, and so we had the basics, and that's what I can really all say about all that. I remember when we moved from our trailer house. I do remember that. It's pretty vague, I guess. It's kind of a blur as well. But so what I do remember is one night my parents were throwing a party, and for some reason I always tell this. I don't know why. It just kind of helps me, because like I had to work on a lot of forgiveness and a lot of honesty and a lot of other stuff that went along with this whole situation. My parents were throwing a party, and I was always kind of the one that I always stuck up for my brother and sister. I was always the protector and whatever. So I went out there and I told my parents to shut the party down, and I remember yelling at everybody that was at that party and telling them to leave, and it wasn't their house, and everything that a 9-year-old kid, 8-year-old kid would say. It was time to, it was time to go home. It was well past bedtime, whatever. This is what I was thinking of as an 8, 9-year-old kid. And my mom and them, everybody just laughed at me, told me to go back to bed. So whatever, I snuck downstairs because we were on a split level, and went down there, called my grandparents, and my grandma answered, and I was telling her everything that was going on, and my mom was listening on the phone upstairs, and she told my grandma that it was done. They were sending everybody home, and that wasn't the case. I got a good old-fashioned butt whipping, went to bed crying. That started my journey with a lot of, or not a lot, but some physical abuse and a lot of emotional and mental abuse that really changed my life. That really allowed me to start struggling with who I was as an individual, with and what my purpose was. So, and they always say one of the biggest tragedies in life is believing we don't have a gift or we don't have a purpose. And with everything that transpired, in the early years of my life, it was hard for me to see my gifts, and it was hard for me to acknowledge any kind of purpose, for myself. I know, I know today that that isn't true, and it took a lot of hard work to get there. And as I continue on in my life here, my parents, they, like I said, they did the best they could, and they got us involved with a lot of with sports. I remember playing every sport imaginable. We even to this day we still, it just kind of just stuck with us. And but like bowling, basketball, baseball, football, whatever it may be, whatever it was to keep us distracted from what they were doing with their life. But like all of us know, kids definitely pay attention, and that's what we did too. We paid attention to what they're doing, and we saw what they're doing, and eventually, it's stuff that we became curious about. Um, Fortunately for me, my I didn't get engaged in it till a lot later, and I do remember, when I was about the age of 15, and I became involved with a lady that eventually became my wife. Eventually I had my child with. I'll just say that because there's other stuff that I have to say, pertaining to all that. um, so it was like the first time I ever really knew what it was to be like in a family type thing. We had family dinners. We had nights where we would play card games. We had movie nights. We had all this stuff that I wasn't used to being involved in. I wasn't ever exposed to this type of living. And so I became very curious about it, and I felt loved for the first time. And so I consumed myself with that, with that family. And it was a different lifestyle for me, and it was something that opened my eyes to like something different, other than living on the reservation, other than poverty, other than struggling in life. So I surrounded myself more and more with that. I became very distant from my family. Also I became kind of distant from my twin brother because he chose a different path that I did. And I remember at the age of 15, I remember we went to our first party, and it wasn't too much before that where my twin brother and I, we shook on it and we made a pact that we were never going to use drugs and alcohol because we saw what it had done, to our parents. We had saw what it had done to our aunts and uncles, and our other older cousins. So that was something we didn't want to participate in, and we didn't want to be involved with it. So we made this agreement with each other amongst ourselves, and I'd like to sit here and tell you that we held true to that pact, but unfortunately we didn't. It wasn't just a few months later we chose to engage in our first time ever drinking, and it was at a house that was um, abandoned, or so to speak, or they had been evicted, and we broke in through the back door, had a party. And I remember going home that night and thinking I was going to get in trouble. We didn't. The next morning, it was a big joke. So then, right then and there, I knew I could do whatever I want, and I wasn't going to get in trouble for it. If they were going to allow us to drink and come home and make jokes about it and tease us about it, what else could I get away with? So, my mind started going, whatever. I didn't really, other than staying out every night and other than drinking every night, my junior and senior year, I didn't really abuse it too much. I didn't like get into any like hard drugs or nothing like that till later on. So then, at the age of 18, I graduated from high school with I graduated with honors 3.85 overall. I had my honor cores, and and life was pretty good. And then that summer, she got pregnant with Tyrese, and I knew that was going to change my world. And it was up to me how I was going to respond, whether I was going to be responsible. It was this was going to make or break me. It was going to show me what type of man I was going to be. And unfortunately, I feel like I don't want to say I failed, but I kind of took it for granted, and So, I had went to college and I played a couple years of baseball at UWS, and we had my son, and then we went through a few years there of where like I was being unfaithful, and that was something that I had seen growing up. I remember my mom being unfaithful to my father, and I also remember my father being unfaithful to my mom. So, and and another thing that scarred me was when my mom left my dad for like 18 months. That was another thing that I struggled with, and that was another thing that kind of something I pushed deep because I watched my father cry, and for the first time in my life that I had to witness him crying. And I remember him punching a wall in our in our dining room at our home, and we spent 18 months picking up the pieces, and it was tough to start out with. He engaged in more and more alcohol. I got left home alone for a week. I was 13 years old, 12 years old, somewhere around there, and I remember being left home, and then I remember calling my dad's father, my grandpa, and and he didn't know. He when I asked him about where my dad was at, he left. None of you guys want him. And I remember my grandpa Fred telling me that, but little did he know that I was the one that chose to stay with my dad. I was the one that wanted my dad back. So, and I kind of always laugh about that because it was just like nobody knew, the truth and stuff. So, but and then upon my dad's return, from that week binge where he was drunk, and then I thought it was gonna be all done with, and here we went to a party in Walker, and I ended up driving home in the middle of winter. And I was like 13 years old, and it took me like, I don't know how long it took me to get home, but it was like 1 in the morning, and we ended up leaving, and I don't think we got home till like 3, 4, 5 in the morning, something like that. It took me forever to get from Walker to Ball Club. And I remember we were driving our old Aerostar van, something like that, whatever. But anyways, that's all beside the point. And so all this stuff that I'm talking about, it led up to like a lot of stuff that I struggled with, when I got into my active addiction. And one of the greatest things that I like hearing and like reading when I got early in recovery was cling to the flat in God's hand. Our dark past is our greatest possessions, and that's true because like, that often reminds me of where I was and where I don't want to be again, and sure, I made some mistakes, I did some things that were out of character, and I wasn't who I was meant to be, who God intended me to be. I was fighting that for the very longest time because, I guess I didn't want to see, what I was capable of. I was content with living that lifestyle where, I was stuck in my opiate addiction where I was, I was using it intravenously. I injected, and and I remember at one point in my life I said I was okay with being called a junkie. I was okay with being a junkie. And my twin brother looked at me and he just couldn't believe I said that. But that's how sick I was, and that's how how far I had fallen down from who I once was. There's a lot of people that always told me, that I always had all these great moments, opportunities that where I missed, where I should have seized the moment, and that's true. With my college baseball, I should have seized the moment there. With my job that I had as a youth coordinator, I should have seized the moment there. But I can sit here and talk about, yeah, what if, this and that, but that's not what I'm here. I'm not here for all that today, because I've let go of a lot of my shame and guilt, and I've let go of my past, stuff that is, my past transgressions that have caused me to, live an unhealthy life. So with my moving forward after 18 and stuff, I had a kid, I was playing a couple years of baseball, and I ended up ruining my arm, and I had two options. I could either have surgery and let it heal, otherwise, just leave it alone and be prescribed pain meds and just whatever, just live the best life I could without having any surgery. So I decided, I had a young kid, I didn't really want to do the whole college thing anymore, so I chose to not have the surgery, and I chose just to get prescribed pain meds. And so I went home, and I was a youth coordinator for a little while, and then I became a carpenter laborer at housing, Leech Lake Housing, and that's where I really started having a downfall, because with the people, they always say, you are who the company you keep, and that was true. I was surrounding myself with a lot of people that were in active addiction, that weren't making very healthy choices, and it wasn't very long before I got curious about it, and when I chose to engage in a lot more opiate use, stronger opiate use, and put a lot of frustration on my wife, put a lot of tension on our relationship, and she gave me every opportunity to save the marriage, gave me every opportunity to save the life we had, and to be able to keep the relationship that I had with my boy. But I had other plans. I was just getting started with my drug addiction, so I really wasn't going to let anybody tell me what I could and couldn't do. So I chose to let the marriage, let it go. I chose, my best thinking got me to where I'm at today. So this was my best thinking was, I'll just go back out to ball club, get a fresh start, and I'll be able to do whatever I want, And I didn't have a job, I was just coming out of like my third, fourth treatment, and all I had was the clothes that I had. I didn't have a car, didn't have much of anything, but yet I was thinking, I'm getting a fresh start. Yeah, fresh start in my parents' basement. So living in that basement, I became very depressed, and I really had to fight my way out of that. So the first step I did was I got a job. And working at the casino was a low wage job, but it was a job. It was a start. When I was trying to put my opiate addiction down at this point, and that didn't last very long. I was divorced for about 6 months, and then I engaged in a relationship that I thought was gonna change my world, and it did change my world, but not for the better. The lady I engaged in a relationship was she was also in active addiction with opiates, and she became pregnant immediately, and it was nothing but a chaotic relationship. It was nothing but neither one of us having a job. I'd have a job every now and then here and there, and it would be just for a little while, and and I thought, well, let's get an apartment. Apartment's gonna help. Let's get a job. A job's gonna help, keep me sober, and having a kid is gonna help me stay sober. None of that stuff could ever help keep me sober. A job, a vehicle, a kid, a girlfriend, none of that stuff. Only person that could keep me sober was myself. And it took me a long time to realize that. So I got evicted from a home. I became homeless for a very long time, and started my journey with in and out of jail, probation violation, treatment, halfway houses, extended periods of time away from my kids, CHIPS cases, domestic abuse, a lot of emotional and mental abuse on both sides. So, and I have a lot of consequences as a result of that, that relationship. I have some teeth that are missing, because of it. I was scarred for a very long time, with the stuff that she had done to me. But I look at it as, it kind of was my karma, because I had done that to my previous partner, and so I was okay with it, because I thought it was my karma, and this is what I deserved, and I look at that now, and that was very sick. I don't believe there's such thing as like, an eye for an eye, and that's I don't believe that. We're all a product of like our own decisions, and whatever else goes along with that. So I chose to stay in a relationship where I could have easily got out of it a lot sooner, but I chose not to. And then along came with all that was a lot of selling drugs, doing a lot of drugs, and they say the world is changed by your example, not by your opinion. So like I feel like if I wanted to help others and change others, I had to change myself first, and I had to live by example. And I was tired of just talking the talk. I wanted to walk the walk. Like I like to refer to as walking a path. So things had to change. I was on my last violation. I was on my third violation, looking at a prison sentence. I had about 3 months left, and luckily I was, and I always believe God puts me right where I need to be, and in the things that I need to hear. So I was in jail with these fellas who had already participated in a program that I was curious about, and that they gave me a lot of information about. So I chose to engage in trying to better my life and trying to make different decisions in my life. So I started asking about wellness court. I got a lot of information about it and got pointed in the right direction. Had a lot of people advocating for me to get into it, and once again, my best thinking, So like when it came time for me to get sentenced to wellness court, I felt like they took too long. They kept me in jail too long, so why not just let me be released on traditional probation? So I made a big fuss, got in a big argument with the supervising agent, was just being a prick to the bailiff, and these guys are all doing all this extra stuff just to help me. Like the judge was, appearing by phone on her day off. The probation officer was coming in on his day off, and everybody was making all these sacrifices and arrangements, just so I could participate in a program that I begged for, that I asked the judge to give me an opportunity to save my life. And that's what I said to her, was give me an opportunity to save my life. And and I almost pissed it away. I did, because I was still stuck in that active addiction, and I was still sick of that addict thinking, and that still comes from time to time. Not so much now, but one thing that helped me with my sobriety, and this is something that I like to tell, is that the lady who I was in a relationship with my two middle kids, the one that was nothing but chaos and nothing but all kinds of abuse and and drug use. She overdosed in the Deer River Holiday parking lot, and I had to give her CPR, and it was one of the most horrific moments of my life, watching someone that at the time I loved her so deeply that I couldn't see past her. She was purple and blue in the face, and she was basically dead. I had to give her mouth to mouth, and then nothing was working. I was freaking out. My youngest boy was in the backseat freaking out, whatever. And I remember looking to the sky and praying to God, please help. And like she took a deep breath finally and went on with our day, and the next day, February 26, 2016, I got violated for the third time. And that was my last stint in jail. And that was also my recovery date, February 26, 2016. And that was all I saw for the next 3 weeks was and it was a recurring dream, and it always had different endings, and that scared me. I woke up in sweats, and so I knew I needed something different. I needed a different direction. I needed a different life, and I had to find my purpose. So, I started all that thing with wellness court, and April 24th, 2016, I was released from jail, and I started my journey in wellness court. That same day, I went home. Saw what my girlfriend at the time was up to. She was exposing my youngest boy to, and I just had enough. I made a choice right then and there. I was done. I was leaving, and I put all my faith in God that I was going to be reunited with my kids. And I say that a lot because I knew there was going to come a time where I had to fight for my kids, because one of the social workers that told me was like, one of the parents has to stay sober for the kids. That kind of stuck with me. And so I went home. I went to Ball Club and stayed at my parents for another month. And was white knuckling it for a month at my parents' house. I was waiting for my twin brother to get out of prison because I thought, we're gonna do this recovery thing together. When he came home, it wasn't before too long where I realized he wasn't gonna stay sober. So I made another decision I probably would have never made, or that I was unaccustomed to making. Was I asked my probation officer for help. I asked him to put me in a halfway house or treatment setting so I didn't have to be in Ball Club anymore. And he did. So it was like May 23rd, May 24th. I entered Hope House 2016. Started my 4-month journey there. In that 4 months, I didn't engage in TV. I didn't engage in too much nonsense. What I did engage in was therapy. I engaged in my treatment plan, and I remember my counselor asking me, pick 3 things that you want to work on in recovery, or in this treatment setting. And I was like, if I'm just gonna pick 3 things, that's all I'm gonna work on. So I told him I needed to change everything. So I started like this journal. And by the time I was done, I would always journal and log stuff down, what I was thinking on a daily basis and stuff that I thought that I needed to change, and, stuff that just kind of haunted me, and, for my shame and guilt. And by the time I was done there, after my 4 months, I had 4 notebooks full of stuff that I needed to change, and a lot of it was probably duplicated. And then instead of going back home to Ball Club, which was only 30 miles away, I chose to stay at a transitional living in Grand Rapids, the Pier House. So these are all choices that I made that helped me in my recovery, that helped me to be, successful, compared to like my past, all my other past treatment stays and my halfway house stays, and that always led me to relapse, because I always thought that when I got to 10 months, I was strong enough. I was going to be the superhero that my family needed. I was going to go save everybody and help them become recovered and get them in recovery. And, so like 10 months, I always felt. So that was kind of my barrier, the 10-month mark. So when I remember this time, my 10-month mark, I got blessed at TLC, Triumph Life Church in Coleraine. So it was a different 10-month for me, And then when I started my 4-month stay at Hope House and continued on to my 10-month stay at the Pier House, I was engaging in my kid's CHIPS case. My boy JS was in Itasca County Court CHIPS case, and my daughter Kira was in ICWA case over on Leech Lake. So here I was fighting 2 separate cases for, one for each of my children. And the only thing they wanted to do was terminate my rights. They told me I wasn't a fit father. They told me I was never going to be a father again. They told me basically my kids deserved a better life, and which is true. They did. They deserved a better life. But, there wasn't any reason that I believed that I couldn't provide that for them. And once I believed that, and once I started, making steps towards that, they started to believe, so I still, even after being told they were going to terminate my rights, I didn't run this time. I stayed consistent with everything, the court cases, the case plan, my visitations, my wellness court, all my treatment work, For the first time in my life, I was doing what I needed to do, and I was making better decisions. That's all. That's what my daughter told me. You just need to make better choices, Dad. So I was doing that for the first time in my life. And I went through the whole winter, I was walking from one side of Rapids to the other side of Rapids to visit my kids, and then walking back after it was all said and done. So, I did whatever I had to do, for what I wanted in my recovery. And we went through the whole winter, and then somewhere around April of 2017, they started to notice the changes I was making, and the good choices I was making, and I was doing really well in wellness court. And luckily, I had one of the judges that was in wellness court was also sitting on my ICWA case, so he knew how well I was doing. So he decided not to terminate my rights. You know, they were going to give me an opportunity to be a parent, to be a father, you know, a custodial parent at that. So once again, we had another battle, you know, in front of me. But you know, I was ready for whatever they were going to throw at me. So like the first thing they threw at me was, well, you have to secure housing. You know, this was like at the end of April, and I had to secure housing by July 1st. So that gave me a little over 2 months. So, you know, my caseworker and I engaged in a program, Range Mental Health and Long-Term Homeless Program, the HEARTH program. And I had an amazing caseworker. She, we hit the ground running. We went to every single person that was renting in Grand Rapids. We looked at tons and tons of privately owned or privately rented places. We went to all the apartment complexes, and you know, time and time again, it kept getting denied and denied and denied and denied. You know, so it was, and it was coming down to like, you know, my time where I needed to secure housing. And I remember this last. It was one of the last ones. It was Pine Ridge, and I remember sending my application in, and the lady told me that, oh well, our manager's on vacation. She'll look at it when she can and whatever. And so I remember getting a call, and she denied me. And I remember getting this advice too in recovery was, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. So what I do, I dialed her number, called her up, and I asked her to reconsider. You know, I told her my story. And funny story is, she took one look at my background and saw a whole list of stuff, and she assumed it was all felonies. And here it was only one felony on there. The rest were traffic violations and stuff. So she reconsidered, and she called me back. July 7th, I secured housing. 6 days after the time, or when they wanted me to. So once again, here we were back at, you know, terminating my rights because I failed to secure housing by July 1st. So here I was once again advocating for myself in front of the judge, and and I just basically told him, I said, you're gonna deny me this opportunity over 6 days, deny me this opportunity to be a father, a custodial parent over 6 days. So once again, they're meeting, you know, they reconsidered, and you know, here I had my opportunity, you know, the opportunity that I was fighting for. By when it was all said and done, I had fought for like, here I think it was 21 months, and JS was like 16 months. So, you know, here I was, July 28th, they were coming home, you know, they're coming home for good, because JS's time was going to expire July 29th. So they needed to be with me July 28th. And was I scared? Yeah. You know, so I engaged in parenting classes. You know, engaged with more time with my therapist. And I had a huge support network called the Sober Squad that we had organized and got started in Grand Rapids in 2016. And that was probably one of the biggest groups that had ever saved, or that helped save, you know, my life. My sponsor was involved in that group, and that was something that I never wanted before, was a sponsor. I engaged in Al-Anon. That was something I never wanted before. You know, I wasn't opposed to all these suggestions that were suggested to me in previous treatment stays. You know, it was time for me to listen for the first time in my life. Listen. You know, God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And they always say, you know, God is a gentleman. You know, he won't come into your life unless he is invited. You know, and that was something that I really had to work on. You know, because I talked about becoming balanced in my life, you know, spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional. You know, I had the other three, you know, it was just the spiritual part. You know, I was very angry with God for a very long time, and, you know, so I wasn't willing to invite him back into my life. And, you know, that was something my sponsor told me, was that he was a gentleman. You know, he'll only come into your life if he's invited. So it was a lot of work, you know, and it was very tough for me, you know, because I I was being whatever. I thought God was attacking me, which isn't true at all. So and it was time for me to to keep putting my best foot forward, and keep moving forward with not only my recovery, but also as myself as an individual, and also myself as a parent. Because I had two kids that were home with me, that were dependent on me. So not only was I you know working to provide for myself, but I was working to provide for them. And that wasn't easy. We got off to a rough start. My youngest boy was mute for like the first 6 months. um, he was very behind with everything. My daughter, she had a lot of anger towards me for abandonment issues too as well. So like anytime I'd leave the house, it was hard for them to understand and accept that I was coming back. So that was another battle. Luckily, I had my uncle Judge that moved in with me and helped me with all that. And in recovery, I've had my losses just like anybody else. Death is very hard, when you're in recovery, because you feel them feelings a lot more. I don't have that coping skill that I always used to have. My opiates. So it was time for me to develop some new coping skills. I took a lot of walks. I listened to a lot of music. I did a lot of journaling. Weightlifting was huge for me. That was something that I engaged in. I engage in sports that that I love to do: softball, basketball, golf. You have to get back to the things that you love to do prior to your addiction. And that's what I had to realize, that all the stuff that I love to do was still there. I just had to put all that other crap aside. Had to let it all go. And the first year was tough. Even part of the second year. But along my way, I've been pretty fortunate I've been blessed with a lot more opportunities where I actually did seize the moment. I seized the moment as becoming a custodial parent. I seized the moment wellness court, graduated without any sanction or violation in 22 months. I'm also now, I sit on the wellness court team as a team member. I also, had an opportunity to go speak in Washington, D.C. on behalf of joint jurisdictional courts. My kids and I were featured on a recovery billboard. So that was another great thing that happened to us in my recovery. When they say, I always talk about service work. I chaired a meeting for 17 plus months, left for 4, and came back and chaired it for like another 7 or 8. I got there early, made coffee, set up, took down, and they always say meeting makers make it, and that's very true. All them cliches that they say, one day at a time. And so, just pay attention and listen, because like the things that people are telling you in meetings and that recovery functions and whatever, they're saying all that stuff for a reason, because they've been there, they've been down that road, and and they've come a long way, and they're trying to help us. And that was something that I was really naive to, because I thought, oh, I can do it my way. But once I finally started listening and started taking these suggestions, it was very easy. Addicts and alcoholics always want to complicate things, and it is a very simple program. Once you truly do work it. So moving forward with with all the custody and stuff, and and now, like with some of the service work that I do today, I sponsor 4 individuals. We have 2 events, sobriety functions, that we usually host. One is the recovery event. It's usually held in June. It's actually supposed to be held this coming weekend this year. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it's been canceled. We do have a walk for recovery that we do, our recovery walk in Grand Rapids that we do. We co-host it with the Hope House that happens in late September. Unfortunately, hopefully that ain't canceled, but it's looking like it might be. And then we have an event that we collaborate with with Leech Lake A&D, where it's the walk for recovery. It's just a little different, but they're all like recovery walks, and we just want to show people that we're here for a reason and that we're not going anywhere, and you want to be that example, because it's time, to fight this epidemic, and we need everybody involved. And and another thing that I had to remember was like, don't take things for granted because someone is praying for what you have, and that's funny because all these quotes, they come up on my timeline and they bring me back to where I was, and sometimes I get ungrateful, and sometimes, I forget all my blessings in life. And it's very easy to do because, with life on life's terms, it's easy to get stuck in that negative, and that's always our addiction attacking us. Our addiction's always going to be fighting to get us back, and so it's gonna do whatever it has to try to get us back. And so that's something that I have to keep in the front of my mind, that I am blessed, and I need to be grateful and have that attitude of gratitude. So and getting back to like a few other things that helped me with my recovery was like I got to have a routine, and with this COVID thing, it was interrupted, and now we're getting back to a little normalcy, and I've been able to get a few workouts in at 5 a.m. And back to work now 8 to 4:30. Still working my second job too as well, and and one thing that I've actually worked on more since COVID has been my spirituality. I have an amazing woman in my life that she's helped me to become more grounded and helped me to become more spiritual. There was a lot of things that I was neglecting, like my smudging, my readings, and that's stuff that I'm very grateful that that she has reminded me, and because it could be taken just like that. It takes a lot of work to get what I got, but it can be taken away just like that. And I have to remember that, and that's because I'm an addict. I'll always be an addict. There's another quote that I like. It always says pigs are, I don't know, I can't remember how it goes. I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm stuck at work, but so today, I don't want to be known for my past. I'll never forget my past, but I don't want to be known for it. Today I want to be known for, what I've done in my recovery. And, they say, there's another quote that says, seek to be worth knowing rather than being well known. And all these quotes, I love quotes. I'm always posting something on Facebook. And, it's just stuff that comes to me, and it's stuff that I read, and it's stuff that I hear at meetings, and that to me, that tells me that I pay attention, and so like that's something that's pretty new for me, and with God willing, on the 25th of June, I'll have 52 months, and to me, that's a huge accomplishment, considering I only ever made it to 10 months all the other times prior, so. And but I also have to remember that it can be taken away. I've had 2 relatives that I know where they've lost their recovery at 23 years and 25 years. So continuing to work the program and not my program is what I need to remember. And I'm gonna leave you with this quote because I think it's what I needed to hear when I got early recovery. If it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you, and that's true. If I didn't have all these things in my life that were challenging my mind, challenging my strength, challenging, my thinking, challenging whatever, my knowledge, whatever, it wasn't going to change me if it wasn't challenging me. So like I needed them caseworkers to challenge me. I needed wellness court to challenge me. I needed my treatment center to challenge me. I needed my sponsors to challenge me. I needed all ladies and gentlemen at the table to challenge me. Otherwise I wasn't gonna change. So, with that being said, I'm gonna say, I love these opportunities where I get to speak and share my experience, strength, and hope. I feel it's a huge honor, and I'm very humbled by it. And I just want to say thanks, Jess, for thinking of me. And I love you guys all, and I hope you guys have a good weekend. And with that, I'm gonna finish up and say miigwech, and hope you guys all have a good night as well.